Have you had your Weetabix this morning? Some of you most likely have. It's only one of the UK's most popular ways to start the day. You get your Weetabix, add some milk, and boom! You're apparently ready to do anything, from running a marathon to punching out a giant, all the way to, if we go all the way back to the original aim of breakfast cereals, refrain from masturbating. It's Weetabix. Wheat biscuits. What else is there to say? I mean, why are we even bothering to talk about it? Well, when you think of games based on breakfast cereals, there's usually only one that springs to mind. Chex Quest, a strange cult classic that American kids could find at the bottom of said breakfast cereal. A conversion of Doom where you zorch evil phlegmoids and preserve the sanctity of Chex. You probably know it already. It tends to come up a fair bit when weird licensed games are discussed, not to mention that, seeing as it's essentially Doom but in a cleaned up and family friendly form, it's not actually a bad computer game. Oh, and there's the Captain Crunch game, which is kind of like raising a Tamagotchi, only it's some other American cereal thing. But of course, these are not the only cereal-based games. Once again, I'm proud to say that the British microcomputers got there first, many years before, proving once again that we Brits are the true innovators when it comes to all things gaming. I present to you Weetabix vs the Titchies, a game from 1984 that you could get for the Spectrum, C64, Amstrad, BBC Micro, or Dragon. Now I know that you're all probably begging for a bit of context and reasons as to why such a game would even exist, so here we go, some of that early 80s nostalgia for you. Back in the early 80s, Weetabix kicked off a campaign to make their cereal much cooler and hip with the times, which, needless to say, started out with anthropomorphising them. Introducing the 5 Weetabix skins: Dunk, Bixie, Brains, Crunch, and Brian. And yes, in the beginning they were presented as skinheads, all drainpipe jeans and Dr. Martens boots, bouncing around to a ska soundtrack. If you know what's good for you, you'd better get your Weetabix. Or obviously they'll stow your bloody head in. Such is the way of things. Skinheads started out as a working class counterculture in the 60s, was revived in the late 70s, had different sides who were associated with everything from communism and punk to football hooliganism and neo-Nazis that were constantly at odds with each other. But by 1982, the skinhead image had become so ingrained and so soft that it could be commercialised and used to sell cereal to kids. The Weetabix scan was a popular ad campaign, lasting through the rest of the 1980s and changing with the times as skins went back out and other trends came in, breakdancing and the like. Dunk was their leader, and he was voiced by no less a figure than the almighty Bob Hoskins, while the others all had their own personality traits. Brains is smart, Brian's a bit dim, and Bixie's a woman. They cared not for other breakfast cereals, which they described as titchy, airy-fairy, and fit for sparrows. What's the point in a light breakfast, eh? Get some Weetabix or neat wheat down your throat, and that's a proper start to the day. If you know you're going to be running into the intercity firm, nothing else will do. The ads are the sort of thing you probably couldn't get away with today. Like old Dunk is almost threatening. He will boot your face in if you don't eat that neat wheat, mate. People would probably complain about this nowadays. Still, the use of skinheads, the somewhat in-your-face and antagonistic tone, and of course the catchy songs, they all combined to make the Weetabix scan a hit. It was a very successful campaign, with ads on TV and radio, little comic strips, loads of print inches, all sorts. And from about 1983 you could get loads of merchandise to go along with it if you joined the Weetabix Club. You could get cards, badges, posters, cutouts, even Top Tracks cassettes featuring hits from the biggest pop artists of the day. And of course, this is how you would get yourself the Weetabix game, Weetabix vs the Titchies. Rather than a tape simply being plunked into the box a la Chex Quest, you collected tokens from buying boxes of Weetabix until you had enough to send off for your preferred version of the game, or if you were a member of the club, you could buy it for £2.75. The promotion also included the chance to win some actual computers to play it on, as well as game bundles that just so happened to include the game. The game was made by a small studio called Romic, who aren't particularly worthy of mention. They only lasted a couple of years, and this is by far the most famous game they made, and this game isn't all that famous. So as far as the game goes, you play as Dunk and you take on the Titchies, the hoity-toity, airy-fairy, lighter-than-air, little whoopsie shirt-lift cereals for sparrows have taken on the form of green aliens, and they're trying to invade. That might sound familiar. But not to worry. The rest of the Weetabix gang have somehow managed to find a cache of Weeta rockets, which Dunk can pick up one at a time and hurl at the Titchies in order to blow them to smithereens. Weetabix, at the forefront of both wheat-based cereal and ballistic missile technology. Anyway, you do this until the aliens are all gone, and then you go to the next screen where the Titchies get a little bit faster, and so on. The Titchies will shoot bolts at you, which you can shield yourself from by pressing the spacebar. If they hit you, then they will deplete your neat wheat meter, which acts as both a health bar and a timer. If it goes down to 0, then the Titchies have won, and the world is an altogether more pussified place because of it. Only these hard nuts can stop this unmitigated disaster from occurring. So yeah, it's sort of a Space Invaders type game, with a little bit of Galaxian thrown in as the Titchies move in various simple patterns, up, down, left and right. And you know what? It's actually kind of okay. I have a soft spot for it. The sound maybe isn't the best and the game is basic as all hell, but it does feature some nice detail. Dunk actually moves with momentum, which you don't often get in microcomputer games. His eyes also move from left to right depending on the direction he's moving. Simple enough, but a good detail anyway. And the game does manage to play pretty fast, with it being kind of fun to rush around getting rockets and then chucking them up. It's not an arcade classic or anything, it's all a bit easy and there's no variation from screen to screen aside from the enemies getting a bit faster. Still, it's an acceptable little 5 or 10 minute distraction. If I'd collected up a load of tokens in order to get this bit of software back in the day, I don't think I'd have been particularly disappointed. I mean, could have been a hell of a lot worse. I'd hesitate to say that it was a good game, but it's an inoffensive and average one. The 3 versions of the game that I played all had different little foibles. The specky version doesn't exactly shine in the graphics or the sound department, and it has some issues with collision detection, but it does play nice and fast, meaning that it's okay enough. The Commodore 64 version has much smoother animation, although you'd obviously expect that. This is a bit more annoying as the Titchies are a lot smaller here than in any other version, although by far the most annoying thing about this version is the sound. Seriously, this might be some of the worst usage of the SID chip I have ever heard. It's basically a bunch of ghastly random noises that remind me of bloody Crazy Bus. So that version's kind of out of the running. And so I would say that this game is probably best played on the Amstrad CPC. It's got more colour than the specky version while playing very fast, and it's also got okay enough sound, for what's there anyway, and much better animation. I like how the Titchies break down when you kill them. The only problem perhaps is that this version is the easiest of the lot, although none of them are difficult. Still, it's the best one. And honestly, there's not much else to say. Weetabix didn't offer up a sequel or anything like that, so yeah, the promotion came and then it went. The non-traditional method of getting the game might make it a little bit rarer than most cassette games of the day, although rarity doesn't necessarily equal value. You could easily pick this game up for way less than a £5, if you were so inclined. It's a perfectly average game, which I suppose was a bit of a surprise as my expectations were incredibly low. But it was a neat distraction. I mean, if you were desperately looking for another serial-based game to add to your full collection of all things Chex Quest and Captain Cruncher's Crunchling Adventure, then this is obviously going to be right up your street. Or, I don't know, follow your instincts and play something that's a bit more memorable. Bye for now.
Oi, thanks for watching this video. Now if you know what's good for you, you'll like it and subscribe, and also have a look at my social media. And if you're really good, you can support me on Patreon and join the community, which includes these lovely guys here. Alexa Jones-Gonzalez, Andrew Dalton, Andy Capt, Asobi Quine DX, Chris Cox, Chris Pode, Cody Spooner, Conrad Pritchard, Daniel Briggs, Dave Cook, David Rose, Dustin Cooper, Freakish Uproar, Gary Maiden, Geordie Alex, James Brown, Jason Stevens, Jace Alexander, Jeff Ladd, Lee Norris, Lucas Kuligowski, Matthias Gramzo, Martin Pataki, Nicholas Tristan, Nicky and Bunty, Potter Margel, Renby Mon, Are You OK 2000, Samir Alamar, Seth Robinson, Simon Gulliver, Tim Wold, Yurka Operator, Zach Quoch, and all the rest of the community. Lovely. See you later.